Hello and good morning. Let's take a look here. Okay, so here I want you to find area, perimeter, or circumference. So what we're going to do here is, and by the way, homework and classwork is due. Make sure you turn it in. I think tonight is the last night. We're in week 2-3. Here's the date. Area is pi times the radius squared. And the radius is not 20. So if you use 20 times 20, you're going to miss it. The radius is half of that, which is 10. So it's 10 times 10, which is 100. And 100 is going to move the decimal 2 places, so it should be 314 square inches. Circumference is pi times diameter. I'm going to leave it as pi. The diameter is 20, so the answer is going to be 20 times pi. And that's called in terms of pi. Okay? All right, let's go on. This one right here, to find the area, you're going to color in the dots here. I want to see that. So color the box. So the base is 5 and the height is 4. So it's just going to be base times height. So it's 5 times 4. If you put half of that, you're going to miss it. Remember, half is only for triangles and trapezoids. This one right here is a triangle. Oh, and perimeter, sorry. It's going to be 5 plus 5 is 10. And 7 is 14. So I'm going to get 24 inches. One dimension. This one right here is base times height. Well, put a dot here. The base is 6. So it's going to be 1/2 the base times the height. So that's 24, and half of that is 12. Perimeter is going to be 8, 6, and 5. That's 11. When you add that up, plus that is 19. So you just add up these sides right here, and that is perimeter. All right, there we go. Today we're talking about trapezoids, so copy this down right here. All right, so the formula is 1/2 the height times the sum of the two bases. So you might say, well, 4 and 2, and the height is 7. Maybe. So let's say you say that. So the height is 7. 7 is the height. And the bases are 4 and 2. Well, this is wrong because the bases have to be parallel, and these bases are not parallel. They will intersect. So the ones that are parallel are 5 and 7, so it should be 5 plus 7. And that should work. Okay? Again, this one right here, the height is actually 2. It goes from base to base. So this should be a 2. So you're going to have to be careful with these. So half of 2 is 1. And 5 plus 7 is going to give you 12. Okay, remember the bases are parallel. Perimeter, you're going to add up all the sides. So that's 12, 13, 14. So it's got to be 18. Okay, one more time. The bases must be parallel. So what some kids do is they turn this sideways, like this. And they say, okay, these are my bases. That's my height. So it's 1/2 the height times the sum of the two bases. So write this down. The bases are parallel. They must be parallel. All right, this one right here you're going to have on your work. You have 2 things to do today, and I'll show you in a minute. But anyway, you're going to find the area of the shaded region. So to do that, you're going to take the area of the rectangle, which is length times width, minus the 2 circles. So minus 2, and then you got 2 circles, so it's pi radius squared. So you're going to do 2 circles, and you're going to subtract it out of the whole thing. and that's going to give you the outside pieces, kind of like the crust of bread. All right, today you got a worksheet here. You got two things. You got the worksheet, and then you got to work these problems. Make sure you draw the diagrams. Now let's take a look at this one. So put your dots. Okay? So draw this diagram right here before I give you your worksheet. All right, so the height is 2.9. So it's 1/2 the height times the sum of the two bases. And remember, the bases are the ones that are parallel. So it's going to be 1.5 plus 3.3. So on your calculator, you're going to add this up. Then you're going to multiply. And then you're going to divide by 2. Okay, so add it, multiply, divide by 2. So if you can't be with us, you can copy this worksheet and draw the diagrams. Make sure you show work, and here it is right here. I'm going to probably show you a short video on trapezoids, and that takes care of the work for liberal arts. Let's turn our attention now to college algebra. Okay, so college algebra, copy all of this down. So let's talk about the rules here. Okay, we're in week 2-3. The rules for the vertical asymptote, you're going to set the denominator equal to 0. For the horizontal, if the top exponent is smaller than the bottom exponent, then by default, it's going to be y equals 0, the horizontal asymptote. If they're the same, like 3x squared over 5x squared, if the exponents are the same, then it's a ratio here. So it's going to be y equals 3 over 5. And then finally, if the top number is bigger than the bottom number, then there's no horizontal. Now for the slant asymptote, if the top exponent is exactly 1 bigger, 3 is 1 bigger than 2, then you have a slant asymptote. And to find the slant asymptote, you have to actually do long division. Okay? So at this point, you would do long division. And we talked about that. All right, let's move on now. How do you find the domain? The domain is you set the denominator equal to 0, and then you work it out. Factor this one right here. Well, a negative and a negative yields a plus and a minus, so you're subtracting. So 2 times 3 is 6, but when you subtract 3 minus 2, you get 1, and that's what we want here. And here we want a negative in the middle, so we want the negative to go with the 3 and the positive to go with the 2. Remember, you always check the outer and the inner. Say that to yourself. Always check the outer and the inner. All right, now we're moving on to 4.2. Copy this one down right here. All right, so let's see what's going on here. The domain, you're going to set the denominator equal to 0. So x minus 2 equals 0. Therefore, x equals 2. And you can't have it equal 2. So the domain will be all real numbers, everything, but not 2. That's your domain. Those are x values that are allowed. To find the x-intercept, you let y equal 0. To find the y-intercept, you let x equal 0. Write that down. Now, I taught you that before, and let's take a look here. Well, if you graph this thing, and let's talk about right here, you have x equals 2. So you want to go to 2. That's your vertical asymptote. The horizontal asymptote is the bottom's bigger, so it's going to be y equals 0. Well, to find your x-intercept, you let y equal 0, but you can't have 0 because that would be on the horizontal asymptote. So this one, there is no x-intercept. To find the y-intercept, you let x equal 0, so you put 0 here, and you're going to get negative 3 over 2. And then you graph it on your calculator. Okay, let's go on. This one right here, copy down number 2. We're going to find the domain first. The domain, you're going to set the denominator equal to 0. So the domain will be all real numbers, but not 0. Let's talk about the asymptotes. Here, these are equal. Okay? So if they're equal, it's a ratio of the fraction here, of the coefficients. So that would be y equals 2. That would be your horizontal asymptote. That would be rule number 2 from earlier. And this one is x equals 0. So x equals 0 would be the y-axis. Now let's talk about the intercepts. To find the x-intercept, you let y equal 0. To find the y-intercept, you let x equal 0. Well, x cannot be 0 because it would be on this vertical asymptote. Actually, it's not in the domain either. See, it's not in the domain, so you get rid of that. There's no y-intercept. To find this one, you're going to let y equal 0 right here. So you're going to get 0 is equal to 2x minus 1 over x. And then you got to solve that equation. Okay, so let's see how we do that. We would multiply, cross multiply. So you're going to get x times 0 is equal to 2x minus 1. And then you're going to solve that equation for x. So you're going to move the 1 over here so that becomes a positive, and then you divide by 2. So that should be 1/2. That's your x-intercept. And then you use your calculator and graph it. Let's go to number 3. Copy down number 3 right there. Same thing. To find the domain, first you're going to factor your domain. So this is going to be x1 and x2. 1 times 2 is 2. You want a negative here and a positive here. Check your outer, check your inner. So your domain is going to be all real numbers, but you're going to set each one of these equal to 0. So x plus 1 equals 0. X cannot equal a negative 1. X minus 2 equals 0. X cannot equal 2. So the domain is all real numbers, but not negative 1 and not 2. Okay? So for your x-intercept, you're going to let y equal 0. For the y-intercept, you let x equal 0. So let's see what we get here. Let me think about this a second. Okay. So, let's plug it in. So if you put 0 for the y, you get a 0 right here. So you get 0 is equal to x over all of this. And when you multiply this times 0, that cancels out. So you get 0 is equal to x. When you let x equal 0, that becomes 0. All this is going to be 0 divided by negative 2. Well, negative 2 goes into 0 0 times. So that's your x and y intercepts. Let's talk about the asymptotes. Here you have an asymptote at negative 1, or actually a vertical asymptote. And then here you have it at positive 2, right here, positive 2. So that gives you your vertical asymptote. Your horizontal one, by default, is going to be this, y equals 0. Y equals 0. and then graph it on your graphing calculator. One more. Copy this down, number 4. All right, so what you want to do is find the domain first. So you're going to factor your denominator. I would factor the numerator and the denominator. So this is going to be x plus 3, x minus 3, because it's the difference of 2 squares. And then down here, you're going to have x1 and x3. And you're trying to get a negative 2, so you want the negative with that one right there. So your domain, the opposite of this, is a negative 1. So it's going to be all real numbers, but not negative 1. And the opposite of negative 3 is a positive 3. So it can't be those two. To find the x-intercept, you let y equal 0. To find the y-intercept, you let x equal 0. Now this right here cancels. So really what you have is y equals x plus 3 over x plus 1. So now you're going to let y equal 0. So you're going to get 0 is equal to x plus 3 over x plus 1. And then you multiply and you get 0 is equal to x plus 3. And then you're going to end up with a negative 3 here when you move the negative 3 over. So this becomes a negative 3. All right? To find the y-intercept, you let x equal 0. So if you let x equal 0, you get y equals 3 over 1, which equals 3. All right, so I have the x and y intercept. Now this is a whole here at 3. 3 minus 3. That's going to give you a whole. So you don't plug 3 back into the original equation. You plug it into the reduced equation. Write that down. To find the whole, you plug it in, plug into the reduced equation to find the whole. And also for this one right here, let's talk about this a second. So you have a negative 1 on this one, which is here, and 3. And actually, to find the vertical asymptotes, you use the reduced. So there's another rule right there. So number 2, to find vertical asymptotes, you use the reduced equation. So in other words, the only vertical asymptote is going to be negative 1 right here. Whereas if you use the original equation, you might say that it was negative 1 and positive 3. Okay? So for the domain, you use the original equation. But when you find the vertical asymptote, you use the reduced equation. To find the whole, you use the reduced equation. So the reduced equation is right here. And what we're going to do to find the whole, we're going to put 3 up here. So 3 is my x. So what you're going to get up here is 3 plus 3 is get 6. And 3 plus 1 is 4. And 6 over 4 reduces. So the whole is going to be at 3. And this is going to reduce to 3 over 2. Okay, I'm going to say it again. To find the domain, you use the original equation. To find the vertical asymptote, you use the reduced equation. To find any wholes, you use the reduced equation. So write that down, make sure you know it. Today's work is right here. And I want you to check your answers and make sure you use your graphing calculator and sketch the graph as well. And I want you to reason out what I said and think about it and try to process it in your head and make some sense out of it. All right, well, that's it for today. I'll see you guys in class. Have a good morning.